Hey, what's happening? Today we're going to be covering concrete fasteners. Concrete fasteners can be a headache if you've never used them before. So in this video, I'm going to show you the different types of concrete fasteners. I'm going to show you how to install them properly and then talk about different scenarios where to use them. So let's get after it. So anytime you're installing concrete fasteners, there are two tools that I like to have on hand. The first one is definitely a hammer drill. You must use a hammer drill when you are drilling into concrete. It has a pounding action that allows the drill to, or the bit to drill out the hole quicker. And also I like to use an impact drill when I'm screwing in, especially tapcons. It really helps to drive that screw. Some common bit sizes that you gotta have: 5/32, 3/16, 1/4 inch, 3/8, and 1/2 inch. Make sure that all of your masonry bits have a good carbide tipped head. If they start getting worn out, then you definitely need to change them out. As you can see, like this one's starting to get worn out, so I got my replacement right there. So when you're installing concrete fasteners, a few things you got to take note of. If you are in a, if you're installing in a solid, a foundation, or like we worked in a parking deck one time and everything was solid concrete, then you really have nothing to worry about. Any type of fastener will work well. But when you are installing in block that is hollow, that isn't filled with concrete, then you're probably going to want to use the plastic anchors or the drive pin anchors. The Tapcons, they work well if it's a really short screw. But if it is a longer screw like this one right here, or the wedge or the sleeve anchors, they do not work well in hollow concrete for obvious reasons, because there's nothing to pull against. So anytime that you're working with a block wall that is hollow, make sure that you use like a plastic anchor, or you can use short Tapcons. Right here is a Tapcon. A Tapcon is pretty much just a masonry screw. It has the blue paint on it to use as a powder coating to make sure that it does not rust away inside of concrete. When you're installing a Tapcon, the first thing that you need to make sure of that you have the right size bit. If you buy a big box, then it'll come with the right size bit. But if you just buy a few, then you'll probably have to buy a masonry bit. So make sure that you are using a masonry bit. So I'm using 1/4 inch Tapcons. Therefore, on my Tapcon box, it says I need to use a 3/16 bit. Okay. I like to use the hex head, the 5/16, because they do not strip out like a Phillips head, and it just makes them easier to tighten down. When you're installing a Tapcon, the first thing you need to make sure is that you drill it to the correct depth. In this scenario, I am using this Boss drill bit, and as you can see, you're supposed to go about a 1/4 to a 1/2 deeper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill all the way down to the end of the threads, because that is about the correct length for, or the correct depth for that Tapcon, since I got to go a little bit deeper than I'm supposed to. So I'm using this block because I just want to make sure that that when you're screwing into a Tapcon, make sure it is solid. If you had to go in the hollow core of the block, I would probably just use like a 1-inch screw, since the block's about 1 inch thick. In this scenario, I got about a 2 1/4 inch screw. Therefore, I'm gonna go dead center, and that way I hit solid concrete. So I'm gonna drill a hole right there. When you're drilling, make sure the drill is on hammer. If it is not on hammer, then the screw will not set properly. So as you can see, I went all the way down past the drill threads. I'm gonna take it out. Next thing, get your Tapcon, and the hole is a little bit smaller than the screw. And as you can see, these rough edges, threads of the screw pretty much cut into that pilot hole. You can see. I can't stress how important it is to use a impact drill. It helps drive the screw, especially the Tapcon. You'll notice that it can be very difficult to drive them sometimes, especially in harder concrete. So make sure you use an impact. The next concrete fastener is what they call like a powder actuated fastening system, or some people just call them a ramset gun. What a ramset gun does is it uses a 22 powder charge to drive, some people call them pins or nails, to drive a pin. You can drive these into concrete, steel, or they can go through wood into steel. On your powder box, it tells you the different scenarios where you should use what. So I have the yellow charges. As you can see, the top of the powder charge is yellow, so therefore it is good into solid concrete. This is a block. I would actually want a green charge for a block, and then the red charge is for steel. And if you're driving into steel, you would probably want a smaller pin, but in our scenario, we're just going into block. I'm gonna nail it into the center. That way I hit something solid. If you drive a yellow charge into a hollow block, it's probably gonna crack it. So make sure that you use the correct charge for the correct application. Another thing, make sure you have safety glasses and hearing protection, which I do right now. So when you use these, first thing, you need to insert your pin. Alright, next thing, open it up. Take your powder charge and insert it there. I'm just going to mount a strap. Ideally, these are for, they're not for really structural things. They're for, you know, strapping up pipe, maybe mounting an electrical box, stuff like that. So I'm going to put my pin through that one hole strap. You got to press firmly against whatever you're shooting, and that is kind of like your safety. So press firmly and then fire your charge, squeeze the trigger. Alright, so the next fastener is a plastic anchor. Plastic anchors work very good for non-structural items. They also work good in hollow blocks because the anchor does not exceed into the block, and the plastic's what's holding it in. So whereas a tapcon, usually the threads are going to strip itself out once it goes into that hollow core. So I really like to use these, and if you know it's a hollow wall, when you're using these, as with everything else, make sure that you drill a pilot hole with a masonry bit. But as with, you know, like your Tapcon and everything else, you would want to make sure that you go the correct depth. So first you're going to drill your pilot hole. Next, you will take your plastic anchor. Alright, you'll stick it in there and you'll take a hammer. You'll finish driving it in. And then you will use, I always like to use an impact. Use an impact and drop the screw. Now with everything else, make sure you do not over tighten it or it will strip itself out. So the last ones I'm going to cover are your sleeve anchor and your wedge anchor. You install these exactly the same. You might hear the name of redhead, so they have, you know, different names depending on who you're talking to. And with these you do the same thing. You drill a pilot hole with a masonry bit, and then you install them. You tighten them down with, you know, you could use an open-ended wrench, or you could use a socket and a ratchet. So you got multiple options there. As with everything else, make sure you are in solid concrete. If you hit a hollow wall, they are not going to work properly and they'll never get tightened down. So make sure if you're drilling into a hollow wall, make sure you hit the center or the edge of the block, or you can use a different type of anchor, but they work best in solid concrete. So like everything else, drill your pilot hole, and I got a little hole. So go ahead and you insert your anchor. Go ahead and have your nut on there. Don't take your nut off, because if you miss or something, you could damage those threads, and then it's almost impossible to get that nut started again. So you're gonna hammer it in. Okay, and then, so the manufacturer has guidelines on how tight it's supposed to get it. I already got it pretty snug. I think it's about 30 to 40 pounds of pressure, so you know, don't over tighten it or you will strip it out.